State Board of Cosmetology this day, June 13, 2011, with roll call for present board members, starting tonight.
Deborah Jones, board member.
David Austin, board member, present.
Linda Zeziger, secretary treasurer, present.
Alex Leader, vice chair, present.
Kobe Booth, board member. Stephanelli, board member.
And the staff present.
Annie Curtis, Chief Inspector, present.
Gloria Alexander, Office Manager, present.
Deborah Blasco, Accountant, present.
Dennis Jimno, Executive Director.
Kimberly Arguello, Senior Deputy Attorney General, here to report.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for attending this meeting. Unfortunately, today our president, or our chairman, Kathy Ditzler, is not able to be here, and we do want to send our best wishes to her for her best of health. When we look at the agenda, we'll go right into the first consideration and approval of the agenda and its posting, and I'd like to ask Ms. Blasco.
It's been posted in accordance with open meeting law in Nevada.
With that said, we'll move on to number 2, the consideration and approval of the board meeting minutes from April 18th.
Move to approve. I'll second.
Are there any questions? I'd like to ask for the vote for the approval of those meeting minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. We'll move to our next item, the permitting the executive director to conduct a beta test of the Milady's online cosmetology theory education. I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Jimno.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, I was approached some months ago by both Milady and Gary Yoshida, the owner of the Milan School of Cosmetology in the Reno area, to participate in a presentation of Milady's newly crafted online theory training, and with the hope of discussing those kinds of issues and what would be the possibility and the reasonable viability of doing that in the state of Nevada. Much to their chagrin, I had a million hard questions that they had to face, and I gave them the good grilling. I told them that when they got the project completed, ready for testing, I would be open to the suggestion, but that we would have to come back to the board to get formal permission to do any kind of testing of a program like that. This is the first in the United States of Milady's approach to online theory training, part of the education. And it's my belief that most educational systems have been moving this way for the last 10 years, especially at the university levels, in both the bachelor's degree level as well as the master's and PhD degree levels. They have very tight controls. The criteria is built by well-educated people who know what they're doing, and there's security systems put in, a number of layers of security systems to answer all of my concerns. So with that, I have asked Gary Yoshida, the owner of the Milan Institute of Cosmetology, to attend this meeting because I was going to ask formal permission of the board to proceed with a beta test, a 3-month beta test of a number of students. At this point, we're talking maybe 10 or 12 students that would be highly motivated to do this kind of approach, as well as would be considered the type of students that would fit well into to get a good, honest evaluation of the 3-month period. They will proceed through several modules of the normal testing that we require, normal education that we require, and they will have periodic testing processes that will make sure that they, in fact, are learning the information that are intended. Gary, would you like to come up to the table? Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave it to let Gary explain how he sees the presentation, the program working, and then what's intended by it. And then what we would like to do is, if it's accepted to the board today, we would come back with a report indicating whether it was successful, the pros and cons, and the efficiency of using this approach in Nevada at this time. Gary, why don't you go ahead and
Thank you. I appreciate it.
morning. My name is Gary Suda, the owner and president of the Law Institute in Reno, Nevada. And like Vince has described, we have approached him several months ago, I would say approximately 6 months ago, and we've been in development with Milady Publishing to do an online curriculum. We emphasize that it's a hybrid online curriculum, meaning that it's just doing the theory portion. Our students for the first 3.5 months will be on site at our school getting the basics down, what we call phase 1. Then after that is what we would propose is the phase 2 and the phase 3 theory portions. We have students coming in about 8 o'clock in the morning, and for some of them it's been a hardship. So this online hybrid education gives them flexibility of schedules. They're single moms, working long hours in evenings and so forth. Have maybe another student put in the survey questions, I commute 75 miles one way. So this will allow them flexibility to be able to focus in on the education. And quite frankly too, we've also learned from this hybrid studies that some students don't like to talk too much in class because they feel like, oh, so-and-so students like talking too much and they make fun of them. And it's just not a good learning environment. For others, they do better typing out their questions to a focused instructor. They do better learning visually. And then with all the technology we have from Milady, videos, discussion boards, and so forth, we think it's going to be a good marriage of a quality education program. Last year we had 90 students drop, and we feel like we might improve our retention rate upwards of 25 to 30%. And so we've assured Vince that we would have the computers that they use document their attendance, and we might want to make sure to verify their knowledge and consistency that they take the test on site at the school. So it'd be the same test that the on-ground students take. So after the 3 months, we'll have the results for the board and Vince, and we're confident that you're going to see some excellent results, and that we'll also have surveys from the students that they enjoy the flexibility. And that's pretty much the concept, and our total hours that we're proposing is 384 hours.
Do any of the board members have questions of Mr. Yasuda or of Mr. Gimno? Are there any questions regarding the recommendation or the summary review that you've received in your packet?
I'd like to make this statement, being a real estate agent, that this is one of the things that we do with that we can take some of our stuff online. I like to go to class and do it. I have another person in my office that does everything online, loves it. And so I think as we're progressing in life that we need to have the options for different types of students.
Thank you, Ms. Booth. Thank you, Mr. Yasuda. At this time, let's take a look at the options that we were given in our summary review. Perhaps it might be best if I review those options, starting with number 3, denying permission to conduct that beta test with those select 10 or 12 students. Number 2, requesting Mr. Gimno to work with Milan in order to provide additional information relating to any questions that the board might find prior to making its decision. And finally, board option number 1, authorizing Mr. Gimno to work with Milan in putting together a 3-month beta test of Milady's online theory training and report results back to the board upon its completion. Are there any questions regarding those options? Would anybody like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion that the board vote on option number 1 to authorize Mr. Jimmo to go further and do the test.
Are there any questions or discussion regarding this motion? Then I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor of board option number 1, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That successfully passes, permitting Mr. Gimno to conduct that 3-month beta test.
We're excited.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
With respect to our next item, Board Member Mrs. Jones will present a report for discussion regarding various violations that seem to occur often with the Board of Cosmetology. Ms. Jones?
I would like to continue this to the next meeting.
Okay. Are there any questions or concerns about continuing this into our subsequent Reno meeting? Okay. Then we'll table number 4 and move right to the progress report. We have a summary report in our packet regarding the Nevada law test. Mr. Jimbo, perhaps I just turn that over for you for a quick moment, and you can give us an update on that.
Thank you, Chairman Peters. As the board requested, staff and asked us to prepare a replacement for a Nevada test, that law test that was in place some years ago, that there was concerns on the board's part about reestablishing that because we were concerned about so many people being cited for simple violations they should have known and carried forth from their schooling, and they had not been retaining that information. We're now at of the 50 questions that we wanted to develop, and a pool of 50 questions. We're at the 40 bracket. We have a scheduled meeting to finish the last 10 shortly. So we believe that the Nevada test itself will be ready for approval by the October meeting. Secondly, though, it raises a concern as we got more into it. I was concerned about security questions, and that SMT and the other people that Ms. Chairman Disler has been not only trained, but participated in a number of educational processes where they developed tests for the national interstate councils test, interstate councils test that's used nationally. And so there was some concerns about how we bring that issue to our board for approval to do the test. And the issues that both Kathy and I have been concerned about are the fact once a copy of the test materials gets out, it's no longer a valid test. Most of your companies that do this kind of work will tell you that you guard that like it was your life support system. And so what we're asking is for the authority for the committee, the subcommittee, to make the final decision if the test questions are legitimate and should be approved as the formal questions. Originally, the board, it was my understanding the board had some desire to see the test, but after looking at all those security issues, we determined that might not be a healthy way to do business. So what we're asking the board is to basically provide the authority to myself and the subcommittee, which Ms. Disler sits on, in developing of the test, to determine the final questions. Now, each of the questions that we are putting in relate to a particular section within the code, the NACs or the NRSs specifically. So those are questions that are really gleaned out of the actual laws that they have to live with, to be sure. And we're using something that is not distracted, so that you don't have questions that lead you to believe the wrong answer is the right answer, that sort of thing. So we're following the procedures that are recommended by the companies that do the development testing. So the two options that are offered for you are the authority to that subcommittee to be the final authority. And the members of that board are Annie Curtis, the chief inspector of our inspection team, Jeff Green, who is an inspector 2, who's familiar and does the inspections, is well aware of what they're running into in the field. And the chairman of the board, chairwoman of the board, Kathy Disler, who's trained in education development and question development by SMT and NIC. And finally, myself, I present more of a typist clerk than a contributor, but I'm also in there to make sure that the questions are legitimately focused at the laws themselves. The other one is that the board could ask us, the other option would be the board ask us to look into it further and report back in some future meeting. I think we're ready for it. If the board approves it in October, and that'll be for a formal approval, then we'll move to deal with the Department of Information Technology and help us convert it to electronic format and be placed on our secondary test that you also have to pass.
Thank you, Mr. Jimno. Are there questions of Mr. Jimno from the response that you heard regarding this? Please.
Why do you feel that the board should not see the questions?
Once we give the board members, at least in a meeting, a formal meeting, it becomes public document. So you might as well publish it in the newspaper. And we don't want to do that. The issue is going to be if the board has some other alternative, then we would suggest a more confidential meeting of one member of the board to validate. You already have the chair, so we didn't see that as a real need. But that's the issue is if we bring documents to the board, it becomes public documents.
Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you, Mrs. Are there other questions of Mr. Jimno regarding the Nevada law testing? Please.
I wanted to comment that the reason I wanted to have a discussion about the violations that happen on a frequent basis repetitively is why I recommended that we put the word rules and regs back into the testing. And have that for the next board meeting to support why we wanted to add that back into our testing program.
Mr. Chair, to Ms. Jones, that is really what it's intended to do. The national test is a generic type test on techniques and requirements of the industry and the sanitation issues. But this test will specifically talk about the rules and regulations and the statutes that govern our industry in our state. So it clearly goes back to the topic you were bringing up.
Mr. Jimno, I also have a question. Absent any other board members asking anything, but what happens with reciprocity? Would all licensees or potential licensees to the state of Nevada be required then to take a Nevada law test?
That's an interesting question. Reciprocity is becoming a difficult word to work with because reciprocity implies, at least in the court's minds, that you should be accepting their licensing process as a straight carry. Is that correct, Kim? So we've gotten more into the terminology of document validation, which tends to leave us a little more flexibility until it's challenged in court. But the issue is, in our law, it basically allows us to accept reciprocity from another state. If there's such a grandiose variance, and there are some various states that have grandiose variances from ours, significantly less, to the point of like 20% of what work training requirements are. The board has the right to require testing in those situations that are like that, but they're very rare that we end up with having to do that. So the answer is no. We would not normally allow that unless we had a change in either our statutes or regulations. I don't think a board policy would carry the weight necessary to allow us to bypass that issue.
Ms. Booty.
I know with my real estate license that that's what you have to do. We take a national and that's kind of a generic test, and then we have to take a Nevada law and take a class on Nevada law in order to get a license in the state of Nevada. So I would think that would be a good way to go, but are you saying that we'd have to go to the legislators to get that changed? Where they would be required, so it would be another 2-year process?
Yes, I would think so.
I would think that would be something that we would want to recommend, and then in 2 years get that implemented, because I think it's important that when you move to a state, you understand the laws of those states. And it never hurt any of us or caused any real estate agents harm. I think it only caused good. So I think that would be something that I'd like to see in our recommendation. Would this be the place we could make that recommendation, or is that a separate recommendation?
Well, that would be part of the process when we begin to either bring forward regulations or new statutes that you want to have the staff pursue in the next legislative session. And we could get the Attorney General's office to give us their opinion as to how would we go about making that kind of a requirement legitimate under our law. But it would not be done today, I bring that back as a board.
Okay. Ms. Jones.
And I can come up with one perfect safety example as to why we should have that state test for reciprocity. And that is the state of California allowing the tool to remove skin from your heel. You don't allow that here. And
know,
Okay, it was volunteer.
We, by the way,
a different state, probably.
through the chair, we have sent a notice to every single establishment on a number of occasions, and the inspectors notify them each time they go about the law changes, as well as a specific requirement you can't even have it in the shop. And there's still a lot of establishments that do that. Remember, you're fighting a cultural issue,
Right.
and you're fighting a practice issue that they assumed was okay elsewhere, and they think it's okay everywhere. But we've made a significant effort. My prediction would take 4 years to actually get everybody to remember it and understand it, and I think we're about halfway at best.
All right. Absent any questions of Mr. Jimno regarding this matter on the progress report for the Nevada law test, let's take a look at our summary review. We had 2 options. The second option is directing staff to carry out the direction of the board to select alternatives to the staff recommendation. Option number 1 is to provide the authority and responsibility for the working committee to determine final construction of the Nevada law test questions and then work with DOT for implementation. Do I have a motion regarding this?
I make a motion to provide authority and responsibility for the subcommittee to determine the construction of the law test.
Option 1.
Option
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Then I'd like to call for that vote. All those in favor of giving the authority and responsibility to that working committee?
Aye.
Say aye. All those opposed? That motion passes with being option number 1. We'll move right to option or number 6, taking a look at the mission statement. And perhaps with Ms. Ditzler not being present today, would there be any opposition to postponing item number 6 so Chairman Ditzler could be an integral part of that discussion? Okay, would there be any opposition to that then? So number 6 then will be tabled until our Reno meeting, where hopefully Ms. Ditzler can participate in that discussion. On item number 7, taking a look at the consideration and approval of the board meeting dates. It was part of our packet. It's taking a look at the new dates. Does anybody have any question on those board meeting dates? If you recall, in our last meeting, we did approve that we were going from 6 meetings a year to 4, and so this corrects those meeting dates, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Ms. Musgrove?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question.
Please, Mr. Musgrove.
Is there anything, any objection to us also having an option put in to make sure that should there have a need for an additional meeting, we could be on call?
Thank you, Ms. Jones. I think that exists as it is.
Mr. Chair, through the chair to Mr. Jones, that option always lays with the board. These are the minimum required by the state. Well, that says you have to have a minimum of 4 meetings per year. This board went to 6 meetings because they were finding the meetings were lasting not only all day, but the meetings requiring into the second day. And they saw the need to have that extra meeting. The board has the right at any time to call for a special meeting posted properly, and add a meeting at any time. These are the ones we post on our website, so everybody can see that we have a regular scheduled meeting on those dates. And if you call a special meeting, we will post that on the website also.
Do any of the board members have any conflicts with the proposed meeting dates and times? If that looks good on everybody's calendar. And then if there is a motion, we can either take a look at the 2 options, beginning with number 2, give staff new instructions to determine new meeting schedule, or number 1, adopt the recommended meeting schedule. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the recommended meeting schedule.
Is there a second for that motion?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Essiger. Is there any question or discussion? And then I'd like to call for the vote. All those in favor of adopting the recommended meeting schedule, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries. And the new meeting dates can be posted. We'll move right forward with the consideration and review and possible approval of the budget for 2011-2012. That looks like this in your packets. Does anybody have any questions regarding the budget before we begin? You might direct your questions to Ms. Blasco.
Well, I would say I did have some questions, and I did ask Vince about them, and I think all my questions were covered because I just want to make sure we had just a couple things like the email, that we had enough funds in our budget to cover the email, so that cosmetologists can start getting emails from us, and he assured me that's covered in the budgets. And I had one other, but basically that was the biggest one, is that we have funds to continue to do that so we can do email blasts, because I think that's kind of important in this day and age of technology.
Mr. Chair, to elaborate a little bit on it, the two questions that board member Booth had was, what is our notification process in advance? How many days? She was indicating we need to take 60 days. We have a 90-day standard. We mail 90 days in advance of the renewal. So that was clarified pretty easily. The other issue is that she wanted to know if we were either in need of money to do, or should we add to the budget proposed the capturing of email addresses so we can use blast notifications. We're in a 3-year conversion process. We're in the second year of the conversion from what we used to do every 2 years, everybody at once, to the DMV continuous type process. So we're in the second year of capturing email addresses. We ask for them. Most of the time we get them. Some of the time we do not. It'll take a 3-year period to finish that list. Once that list is finished, we've been able to notify every licensee via their email address of a change or a law change or whatever needs to be done. So that it is in the budget. It's been an ongoing process for years.
Thank you for explaining.
Yeah. Ms. Benaldi, did you have a question? Any other questions of any of the board members? I had a couple of questions that I wanted to just clarify for all of the board members. So I thought I would ask Ms. Blasco. As we look at just the historical Gifford, what are these are the audited reports? The compiled financial statements, pardon me. I just wanted to double check and have a verbal explanation for the way that the depreciation works, because I noticed that the depreciation has escalated from about 4 years ago, where it was about 60,000, to where it is now at over 200,000.
Right.
How does depreciation work for us?
The generally accepted accounting principles changed actually in fiscal year ending '06, where instead of just expensing those larger assets that we may have purchased, we started to depreciate them. The depreciation is very high right now because we bought the Versa licensing system, and that's software. That cost us over $400,000, and we depreciated over 3 years. So this coming fiscal year, you're going to see that is all going to go away. And so the depreciation will drop back down. Leasehold improvements, because of the change, what we did in the office, that is depreciated over 15 years. So it's a very small number, even at that. It's probably less than $500 a month. And furniture is 7 years. So we have a few more years with that for all the furniture that we acquired.
And did you mention Versa?
Yeah, the Versa system. That was the biggest expense, and that's 3 years depreciation.
Comment is that those were all paid for in advance. There's no outlying liability, but we must carry them on the books to show that they're depreciated over the lifespan of the equipment.
Right. Any other questions of either Ms. Blasco or Mr. Jimno regarding the proposed budget for 2011, 2012? I just have one other question if there's no other ones. The one thing I wanted to double check on that compiled financial statement again, I know it's maybe not quite in this category, but I just wanted to double check when we looked at the cash and the cash equivalents, it lessened.
Mhm.
But then I noticed that the investment in bonds increased. So did we open up a new?
No,
up a
that's
new
always
CD?
that's always changing. We've had the reserve in CDs, and so they mature, and then you're going to see it in different spots. You'll see it in the money market when it matures, and then when they put it back into another CD, it moves back down to that bond category. And we're not doing anything really long term because interest rates are so low now. We're really not earning anything on our money. So by keeping it short term, hopefully if the economy gets better, then they can start going back into more lucrative CDs.
And then I also noticed that just as historically, we're seeing a decline in the board fine income and also the licenses and fees. Have you also seen that?
Yes, yes.
Statistically? You've
Yeah,
seen that?
that's gone
And
down.
is that reflected in the way that the budget has been
Yes.
put together?
Yes.
Mr. Leader, I might be able to help a little on that too. As enforcement becomes more effective, you should see a natural rise original, and then it starts to taper off in a long, slow decline, a steady decline. We're seeing some of that now. The other issue is that this is the first year of the long-range plan, as I've been predicting for some time, that our reserves are going to start to supplement our daily operation, which means we've been able to hold fees at the same level for a lot of years, and we'll be able to hold, we think, until 2015 without any fee increases, which is good for the industry itself. But it's all part of the long-term plan. We think we're going to become just about balanced in 2015. So the early savings is now paying off, the ability to go through these tough times without having to worry about do we have enough money to make the next payroll.
Any other questions of Mr. Jimno or Ms. Blasco? Is there a motion regarding the proposed budget?
I would, go ahead, Ruth. Go. I'll second it.
I'll take the motion to accept the proposed budget.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any questions or any discussion? All those in favor of approving the proposed budget?
Aye.
All those against? Motion carries. Then that moves us to the review of those treasurer reports, which were somewhat integrated into that last discussion. But if are there any questions regarding March or April of 2011 on your compiled financial reports? No concerns, no questions? These I don't believe require approval. They just are submitted. They're just submitted and received. And so those have been received. Absent any questions or discussions, we'll move right into number 10, the Executive Director's Report. All of you received this as part of your packet. If you haven't, let us know. Were there any questions of the report that you read before Mr. Jimno might summarize anything for you? Or Mr. Jimno, would you like to add anything to your director's report?
Yes, as you're well aware, I write the director's report from date to date, and that way it's a constant. If you pile them up, you can read everything that's going on in the organization. Since the date of May 31st, when this was actually drafted, we've lost a second employee. As you're aware, we have an opening in the inspector's staff now, and a second employee resigned last week to take a job with more pay and has moved or less, Alaska has taken a position with another agency, not a government agency.
Is
But
that the rental office?
no, she works out of this office, yes. So she's submitted her resignation and is moving on to another company. The SB 193 has passed. It didn't pass quite as you had requested it to be submitted to the legislature, which is not a surprise. It created a couple of different issues that we will be working through over the next 6 months. The first issue was in SB 193. It got by the Senate committee, and it was approved unanimous as it was drafted. It identified a couple of issues of concern. One was the surety bond. They recognized what the surety bond was not doing, and they realized that the insurance commissioner was called to testify before the board, the Senate committee, when we were there, and he indicated that his analysis was about the same as what we analyzed, and indicated that they were having the exact same problem in the contractor board, and they had a number of companies failing because of it, just because of that requirement. They couldn't get their surety bonds in a way that allowed them to do the projects. We have, as I indicated to the Senate, we have one that was in critical condition that, based on whatever the legislature did, would dictate what I have to do next. We had a number of, a couple of others that are in significant financial issues of concern because the surety bonds were so high and so expensive to get. We are now in renewal process. So now what happens is we get a copy of their application, and their surety bond has to come with it that shows that we have a current surety bond in place. We've only had one that we know of at this point. 7 of them, has 7 been licensed so far?
Pardon?
How many licensees of the schools?
There's 19.
Yeah, but how many have you licensed so far this year?
We've licensed about 6.
6 of them so far. We have one on my desk that is not able to produce the surety bond. So that we're going to have to decide how we're going to deal with that. The legislature, though, in coming to the compromise, I think I sent a copy of the latest version of the SB 193 to you. Didn't really deal with the surety bond issue once and for all, but gave another option to be crafted. So we're going to have some public meetings, workshops, and hearings, as well as probably some private meetings with the schools to see what their input is over the next couple of months. And the hope is that they will come to the table with ideas that might be workable, that's within the drafted legislation as approved by the legislature. And if it is, then we might be able to build a new system that is more accountable for those who cannot afford a surety bond because they're not in the deep pocket condition and don't have the equity in their homes and what have you to provide the liquid capital that must support the bond. And there's another alternative that the legislature put into it, which included an option to follow the federal invoicing and collection provisions within the student aid program that allows for what the feds do is they put the money to the school for a student, and then they're not allowed to get more money out of that until certain parameters have been met. So the legislature seems to like that idea and threw that into the law, although I don't know how it all works yet. And then the schools have been somewhat reluctant to give up the current system, even though it wasn't working for us, and we're the regulation board. And so we want to get there and put a solid input from them. I know we had a lot of meetings, and you guys got tired of hearing me talk about it. You see the smiles on the face, although everybody seems to not remember all of that. So anyway, we're going to include them in the meetings, and if some of the board members would like to attend those meetings, please let me know. Remember, it's got to, it can be a meeting, but we have to post it if there's going to be board members there and that sort of thing. But I'd like to get on that pretty fast. As part of this report, we didn't know any of this until almost the last day of the legislature. So we're still just analyzing now what the law really says to us. then I'll start to get the meetings together.
I just have one question about that. Like the school that can't meet their obligation right now, can we give them, can we allow them to stay and continue their business until this is all resolved?
I made an administrative decision to actually allow that school to survive during the process of the legislature. It was probably something that, could be held in court to decide what should have been done. Well, in this case, we're in the same boat with that school. They've applied. They don't have a surety bond. And one of the provisions would allow them to use a different formula to stay alive if we adopt it in regulation. It is not adopted in regulation at this time. So there may be a procedure, and I understand there's a procedure for emergency regulations that you have to go through. Then within 120 days, you've got to come up with the real ones. So that's a discussion with the AG's office to make sure I understand all the ramifications and how we do that before I make the call. But it's a dire situation for one individual school, and there's a couple of others that have been moaning and groaning about the difficulty of.
So if I understand you correctly, we can give them another 120 days?
I don't know. I think we might be able to do that by either coming up with the emergency regulations, or if might be a policy decision to allow it to survive until we resolve the issue, because it would be a loss of jobs and a closing of a business, and that is exactly the opposite of what I heard from the legislature. The legislature was very clear in instruction to me that we don't want to close businesses on purpose when we're in such dire recessionary conditions.
And I would say as a board member, I would agree with that 100%. I'd like to see us come up with a solution to try and get this resolved.
So we need to do it legally. We need to do it within the parameters of the law, or within judgment that says that if we were challenged in court, that we at least have a legitimate defense.
And on the other side of that coin, we don't want to financially disadvantage the schools that are coming up with their surety bonds.
That's
But
correct.
aren't some of those coming up with their surety bonds because when they started out, they can get them at a lower fee?
Well, there's
So
two.
the newer ones are actually being burdened with a lot more?
There's three levels. The first one is the schools that were occupied and operating in a healthy condition in 2005 were given a grandfather provision. Said they only needed $10,000 of surety bond. Those schools after that, they required a $400,000 bond. And one of the anomalies that I noticed when I first came is when you did the formula, no matter which way you did the formula, it came out $400,000 or more. And the maximum amount you can charge is $400,000. So the formula is really more of a cosmetic document than a reality document. Those schools have gotten their schools approved with a $400,000 bond, and at the time of approval, their finances look fine. Since then, the recession has taken hold deeper and deeper, and some of those people who use their assets, their liquid assets at home, equity in their home, in land, cash in the bank, have dried up. In the recession, equity, for example, my own home lost 50% equity overnight. I mean, that's the cash value that nobody wants will support anymore. So those people who use their homes and those kinds of instruments to back their bond can't come up with the collateral anymore. That's the second issue. The deeper pocket companies, the ones that, like Mr. Milan, who has several schools in several states, are able to get their bond based on their reputation and financial stability. The ones that get in trouble are the ones that only have one or two schools, and they're more mom and pop oriented, as we call them. They're individual owners or a small consortium of limited liability partnerships. Those are having a hard time because they can't come up with liquid cash. And the insurance companies that we checked with basically told us when we asked the question, is we require 50% of the face value of the bond or more. In some cases, 100%. And, I mean, you have to put liquid cash. And they don't want mortgaged homes anymore. They want cash in the bank or that you tie up and it can't be moved without their permission, things like that. So it's really a significant problem for us. And I'm going to do whatever I can to walk through this tightrope to make sure everybody survives if possible in lieu of what was advised by the legislature. On the other hand, we have to stay within the requirements that we're allowed to by law. So I may have one school that may have to be closed, I don't know. But we're not going to be able to get this resolved in the next 2 weeks. It's going to take several months. And whether we use the emergency or the urgent regulation requirement, or we move towards resolving it quickly, I'm not yet totally in grasp of if those are possible. One of the things that the legislature did for us as a courtesy to the board was wrote it in the legislation itself, because the governor has a moratorium on any regulation to be processed before January 1st, 2012. They put it in the legislation that requires me to move as fast as we can get it together, so which allows us a little more flexibility on the date we push it forward to the legislative commission. What it means to us, we have to have some public meetings and workshops that would have to post it all. We have to pull together what the board thinks is the appropriate approach. We put it in final form and check with the Legislative Council Bureau to be sure we have the authority to do it and it's written the right way. Then we will have to pass those regulations to the Legislative Commission, which is a joint body that has the authority to make law through regulation, which represents representatives from each house. Half of the commission is from each house, and they would have the ability to pass it in final form. And that's what they did. They moved it out the NRSs. They wrote in the NRSs that says now we'll resolve it in the NACs. So that's where we stand now. We have a lot more work for us and a lot more meetings.
Several years ago, I know Mr. Jim Miller and David Strawson will recall we had this situation with another school.
Yes.
And it was aggravating, but it was also a lot of hard work from Mr. Jim Miller, a lot of work from Mr. Austin. And it ended up that the people closed the school and all the students lost their money. It was a very sad situation, so I would like to see this not happen again where it's drawn out for another year. So what are the process? I know we're trying to be good-hearted by extending it, but it can also get out of hand. So I would just like to make that comment. I believe you were on the board also, weren't you, Mr. Leader?
Ms. Jones, did you also have a question or concern?
I kind of like the idea of the federal thing where the monies aren't being paid in advance. And I think that's where a lot of the problem comes in, is when monies are paid in advance. It's very easy for a business to decay and everybody loses their money.
At that time, it was very hard to get the license and get bond. Is it still hard to find insurance companies for the bond?
Oh, yeah. That's why.
Mr. Chair, through board members, yes, it's extremely hard to get the bonds. Some of the schools that have a long history or get a better chance are still paying exorbitant fees, $12,000 to $14,000 for the fee per year, plus they have to put up a large quantity of money. The older schools that have been around a while, that are now open to new school, a lot of times can get it cheaper, maybe a fourth of what the face value is, where the new schools that have no history will do 50% or more. And one of the problems that the commissioner testified to in our behalf was the fact that when a bond is paid for, it's viable. When a bond is not paid for, it becomes lapsed. And many of the companies that have gone bankrupt, like everything else, they stop paying their car insurance, they stop paying their electric bill, and they stop payment on their bond, or they don't renew it. And we get a notice. We were getting a notice anywhere from 30 to 45 days after it happened. The latest one, we got in advance, first time I've ever seen that. We got an advance notice that if they don't get it resolved by July something, that they will be canceled. So it's really difficult. It's a difficult situation for businesses themselves. They're struggling. I feel sorry for them. I'm going to be forced in the position of closing some of them.
A very important issue, and I really appreciate your attention to it. I also want to publicly acknowledge our lobbyist, Jeanette Fells, who really has done an outstanding job this legislative session. We did emphasize the surety bond as part of the director's report. Were there any other questions of Mr. Jimno regarding the other 4 or 5 subjects that were covered on his director's report besides the surety bond? There's no vote on this particular matter, so if there aren't any other discussions or questions, then we'll move on to the testing reports, the testing activity. Mr. Jimno, were you completed what you wanted to say regarding this report? Thank you. So on the testing report, you've all received that written summary for both March in Las Vegas, or Southern Nevada, pardon me, and Northern Nevada, and then also April 2011 for both Northern and Southern Nevada. It also included the my favorite report. Are there any questions for the testing department or Ms. Alexander regarding this submission?
I do have a question. Based on the findings between Northern and Southern Nevada, if we notice a trend of Southern Nevada having more failures than normal, do we as a board talk to the school, find out if there's a problem?
I think we have more failures because we have more testing. Just statistically, I think we're always going to have more failures when there's more testing.
My comment was north versus south. If it's the same test, why would south versus north?
It's really not different.
Is it because there's more schools here?
Yes, the numbers are going to, through the chair, the numbers for the testing is going to be much larger here, because we have about 2 million of the 2.7 million population in this region. The other 700,000 is spread in the northern area. So the numbers are going to be skewed that way. But if you bring up a good point with past failures, NACIS is one of many accreditation agencies. It just appears that most people in the state of Nevada go through NACIS as their accreditation school. There's a number of them. But NACIS is very concerned about pass-fail rates. And my concern is, too, there's some schools that have much more formalized programs, and their pass-fail rates are excellent. Like Mr. Milan is one of those that they pride themselves on pass-fail rate. Academy of Hair Design down here has a very high pass-fail rate. The trouble is some of the schools have much lower one based on the clientele base that they utilize and where they get their students from, that sort of thing. But we pay attention. We have no authority really to do much about it, but to remind them that if they're going to be a Title IV school, Title IV being the federal student aid funding program, that they have to keep those pass-fail rates up, because eventually they'll come back to bite you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
I have a question right there on that. I know, like, for Clark County School District, all the schools are rated. Is that something that we could put on our website? These schools, this is their failure rate, this is their pass rate, so that it's out there for the public to look at when choosing a school?
I guess the board can do anything it likes, but the concern I would have is what's the purpose of it, and does it unfairly judge one school against another?
The purpose would be like when you send your child to school, you're going to want to go to this better school where the success rate is better versus a school that doesn't have that success rate.
Well, I guess the answer is we'd have to ask the Attorney General to see what kind of trouble we'd be in.
And that's what I would think. I would think that would be a great tool as somebody looking to see what school you want to go to. What is their record? And Clark County School District doesn't. I don't know why we couldn't. But it would be a good thing to ask the AG's office.
In a sense, Ms. Booth, because we license all the schools, they're all successful schools. The fact that they're a licensed school of cosmetology is an indicator that it's a successful school. I hear what you're saying, but I also feel that the licensing of that school is also part of your answer.
But I think that is one tool, and just because somebody has a license doesn't mean they're good at it. I think the thing of it is, like with the school district, I have people all the time saying, I want to go to that school district, I want to live in that school district, or I want to go over here because of the high school or the sports program, or some of the schools I'm a grandparent, I don't know much about, but Some of them have international classes where the kids can learn a foreign language, so they want to be in that school. So I think it would be a tool that we could provide, and they can make their own assumptions on the pass-fail rate.
Mr. Chair, a response to clarify the issue is one of the concerns I would have, and I have not discussed this matter with the Attorney General, is most of those kind of rating systems are third-party ratings. They're not the regulatory agency that actually does it. Example, in Nevada, we have the Department of Education that takes care of the schools within the state that forces all school districts to comply with their regulations and statutes. And there's specific law deals with education and stuff. I don't see I don't see the regulatory bodies rating agencies because I think it crosses over from regulation into either endorsement.
That's not what I'm asking is a rating. I'm just saying that you put in there what their pass-fail rates are. It's not saying this is how I rate you. This is the facts. This is how many students you have. This is how many failed. Just those basic. Okay.
Let me just interject. Some agencies do that with their schools, and it's going to depend on what information you require from the school. Because if they only have one person taking the test at that time, and that person fails, they're going to get a 100% fail rate. And that's not necessarily indicative of their entire program. So you really have to look at the information that you're requiring from these schools and how indicative that is going to be of their overall accomplishments in terms of pass-fail rate and then first time, second time, third time takers. I mean, there's a lot of information that normally goes into that type of a categorization that your board doesn't require.
Thank you, Ms. Arcona.
Can I say just one more
Right.
thing?
Yes.
In my thinking, and I'm just trying to help you out, I'm thinking, if you have 1,000 students and 5 failed, I would consider that a good school, or 10 failed. That's what I was saying, that kind of data. How many students, how many failed. That's all the more that I would see as posted. That's it.
Ms. Alexander, did you want to add anything to your report?
No, I would like to say because students have up to a year after they finish school to take the exam, that also would affect the pass-fail rate because you have some students that wait till the last minute, then you have some that take it right away. So because of that, that to me would affect the pass-fail rate for a school, and it wouldn't be fair to rate them according to the pass-fail rate.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Are there any other? Yes.
Just a quick comment. If Ms. Booth would like us to look at it, we will inquire at the Attorney General's office, see if there's any other agencies that do it, what their criteria is, what's the motivation. One of the things I look at would be if we were challenged in court, what rationale would we lay on the table as the reason we did it? Those kinds of issues. We take some research.
And I would appreciate that. I just think it's important, and I don't think that it's a tool. It's not an all-out. I just think it's a tool that would be a great tool for a student looking at the cosmetology board and something we could offer them.
Thank you, Ms. Booth. Excellent recommendation. So I trust that you'll take that into account and maybe just talk with Ms. Booth further about what her intentions
And
are
sometime in the next 2 or 3 meetings, I'll bring it back.
to help manage. And maybe see Mr. Jimler to
Yeah,
kind
I
of
will.
elaborate further on your expectations. Absent any other discussion, then we'll move right into the Chief Inspector's report. Looking at the unit activity reports, you have a summary from March and April of 2011. And maybe I'll just open it up to Ms. Curtis if you have any comments before the board on your report. Any other board comments or questions of Ms. Curtis? You, Ms. Booth?
I learned something new. I'm a newer board member, and I learned something new because I noticed there's a lot of people that are working with an expired license. And it was under my impression we didn't let them know ahead of time, but I found out that we gave them a 90-day notice. So I was just really, it's something new that I learned, and I guess there's really no excuses for working under an expired license. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I did learn that.
Yes.
Being that I'm not a cosmetologist, I thought I had heard our computer program did not wasn't capable of doing that. So I was feeling empathy.
For me, Miss Curtis, I just would like to see your header just a different color because it's just difficult to resolve. So maybe if it were just a gray screen rather than color, not that big of a deal. And then I just wanted to also ask Ms. Blasco on the citations for April 2011. We gave a citation CCPS 19. Did we collect on that license? Did we collect the fine amount?
Which one?
It is the PS 114 CPS. It's the fifth one down.
I'd have to check back in the office, and I don't think we can really discuss publicly about
Right, we
someone.
can't discuss that particular one, but can we find out, Ms. Attorney General, Ms. Arella, can we find out if something was paid? Not really. Okay. So, never mind.
That's not on the, yeah.
That's not on the agenda to ask that particular
If
question.
you have a particular question like this,
So maybe
board
just-
members have the right to validate information, so you're welcome to.
Come in my office.
Okay. So at another time. Are there any other questions or concerns of Ms. Curtis regarding the inspection report? Then we don't approve that particular report. We just receive it and accept it. At this time, I'd like to open the floor up to our audience, the general public, and ask if anyone would like to approach the board or approach staff with any questions or comments. We certainly appreciate that you've been here. If you come towards the stand, if you could please announce your name and spell your name for our transcriptions.
Rosemary D'Alessandro, and it's D'Alessandro.
Needs a
Rena, I'm from Rena. I would just like to know if when Nevada is going to put in the Nevada state laws. Like, do we have a deadline of September or October or maybe January of next year?
Let me answer that for you. The law test was taken out. They,
Right.
2 meetings ago, or 1 meeting ago, I can't remember, the board directed us to craft a new one and get it ready to put in. Right now, it's coming back before the board in October. If they say go, they like what we've done, we will then begin the process of converting it to install it actually in the district. So sometime by the end of the year.
And when will you notify the schools? Will you give them like a month's notice?
Well, the schools should be noticed that part of the decisions the board makes. We will send a letter, we always do.
Okay.
And we'll tell you that we're going to do it as of this date.
Okay, thank
But
you.
that's a responsibility. I think the school should be working on it right now.
Okay.
Right, don't wait for us to tell you.
No, absolutely not, absolutely not. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other questions, please? And if you could just announce your name and spell it for...
Good morning, I'm Gwen Cramo,
Thanks.
the Director of Expertise Cosmetology.
Could you spell your last name?
It's BRAIMOH. I just kind of wanted to talk about the SB 193 bill that as a school owner, I'm an old school owner, but we have a new campus. So we weren't just grandfathered in on our second campus. We're under the $400,000 bond, which I'm just kind of speaking on the behalf of myself and the other schools that this is an issue that we've kind of been battling with. I'm sure you guys know already with legislation about the bonding issue. One is that as a school owner, I feel that if we allow no bond, that we're going to have all kinds of undercapitalized schools coming into our market, and then we will also have the state dictating how we can accept our cash from our students. So the way that we read the bill, the new bill, is either or. Is either you can have a bond or whatever the state regulate, or if you are under Title IV funding, that your students come in under that particular law. So I'm not quite sure. So we did send emails out, wanted to make sure that we're included in the process of how this bonding issue, not only the bonding issue, but the grading issue. I have a concern with the grade license too. So I'm just kind of expressing to the board members today and the Attorney General that we would like to be included, and I'm not quite sure what some of the other schools' concerns, but I will make it a point to be at the board meetings, because there were some things that supposedly were said a couple of years ago that I couldn't remember. Maybe they were, but I'm interested in the bonding and the grade issue.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, we fully intend to include them in the dialogue, whether they want to do it at special meetings with the schools all present, as I indicated before in my staff report, or be announced and have to legally publish everything on the workshops and public hearings, so they're all discussed publicly before the board and noticed properly throughout the state. Now, we do send notice to each of the schools what the agenda looks like for each meeting when we post, just as you get your packages. But we are going to have some special meetings that we're going to have to see what their input is specifically. The law is a little confusing to follow because it was modified from the original to the next modification. So there's going to be a lot of discussions that has to be made. But the legislature speaks whether we like it or not, and that was their solution. So we have to figure out what it did to us and then how it affects everyone. It was decided in a conference committee, which these are the rules of the conference committee. They get 3 members from each house who disagree on what the amendments might be. They get together. We're not allowed to ask any questions. All we can do is sit there and watch. And the hope is we figure out what they were talking about. And so that's where we are now. They added a modification to what was approved by both houses. The 2 houses had a slight difference in opinion. They've ironed that out, and that's what we got. So the governor, I haven't heard from the governor if he signed it yet, so it's not even, until he signs it, it's not law. So we have to wait for that. But in the meantime, we're going to try to figure out what the law says, and then how we meet with all the parties involved to say, all right, this is our parameters we have to live within. What are the options that you guys might have, input that you might have, and that sort of thing. So that's where we stand at the moment. Now that'll take, I'm hoping to start getting some discussions going on that very quickly because of the time frame. The grading issue, totally different issue. We had already gotten through the Senate, and the grading issue actually was decided for us. So the sponsor of our bill said, I'm going to do it. You don't have any option on it. So our choice was kill the bill or take it the way it was. So they added grading into it. They asked for our opinion on training. We gave them our best opinion since the board had directed me a couple of meetings back to start research on that for the 2013 session of the legislature. And so we had some preliminary work done, so we put that on the table. And that's where we stand with that issue. There are some issues of what the legislature wanted, what we wanted, and what the schools want. Somewhere in the middle is going to be what we're going to end up with. But again, that will be discussed ad infinitum to get it so we can have a public workshop to hash it out publicly in front of everybody and under a posted meeting. Then we'll have to have a workshop or a public hearing after that. And then the board will then approve what they want to do. Then we can submit it to the legislative commission, not before that. So that all takes time. And hopefully everybody will be involved in the input. That's all I can tell you at this point.
And now you're going to do meetings in Reno and Nevada,
Yes,
correct?
that's how I do it. I do both.
And then Ms. Bramo, just to, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Just to also reassure you is that the approval of undercapitalized schools is a real big concern of mine. And staff has a detailed system in place to weed out undercapitalized applicants. So to kind of reassure you that that system is in place and is very strategic in targeting an applicant that potentially would be undercapitalized or would be trying to enter the market with the intention of not staying in the market.
And I think also too, it has a lot to do with how the board will be kind of dictating how the schools can also collect their funds. Even though we're Title IV approved, we do have some students that make payments and they pay cash. And I mean, how the law was reading at first was that the schools couldn't collect more than like 25% in increments. But if a student, say, should have 50% of their program and they're only at 30% of the program, you've only collected 25% of the funds, and the student decides to drop. Then you kind of leave the school, and not just my school, it's like all the schools, they're paying it, who's going to pay that balance? Then you have to even start discounting, your cash pay students. So I think it's just kind of something that the board will be getting themselves into that, well, now that the law kind of reads a little bit different, I'm just kind of interested in how it's going to play itself out.
It's so obviously complicated. That's why I appreciate you expressing an interest to be involved in it. And I would just really strongly encourage you to maintain close contact with Mr. Jimno so you can be really part of that review process.
Okay.
It'd be very important.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns regarding the comments? Are there any other questions from the general public that would like to make your concerns before the board? The next section then is there are future agenda items, and so I'm going to have Ms. Alexander pass out the conference registration form for the National Interstate Council of State Boards of Cosmetology. The NIC conference is in Little Rock, Arkansas, towards the end of August of this year. She'll pass out that form to the board members. Are there other comments by the board members?
Yes, I thought that the conference was going to be in Fort Lauderdale this year.
The form says Little Rock, Arkansas.
Let's vote on that prior meetings.
Am I just getting that wrong? Did you know I'm just getting
it
this?
was scheduled for Fort Lauderdale. I did not go to the last one.
Yes.
But Little Rock is where their offices are.
I stand
Fort
corrected,
Lauderdale.
Ms.
Fort-
Jones.
it's
You're
Fort- it's Fort
absolutely
Lauderdale.
right. Little Rock is
Where's the
where we're
agenda?
sending the
Right, the form
paperwork
to,
to.
but it is scheduled.
That's not necessarily where the conference is. Any other comments by board members for future agenda items? Just as a formality, the two items that were being carried over from this meeting are the discussion of the violations that occur often, item number 4, and then a possible review or revision of the mission statement, item number 6. Those will be future agenda items. Are there any other questions or concerns from anyone in the room prior to closing the meeting? Ms. Alexander, did you have any comments regarding the NIC conference?
No, I would just like for them to please get them back to me as quickly as possible so that I can make your reservation and so that you can be assured to get a better hotel room and the flights that you want.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Mr. Jimbo, anything to add? Ms. Orwell? This meeting is adjourned. 10:16. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's not little.